Through the generous contribution of Dr. Lewis's family, we're very fortunate to be able to share with you these timeless recordings of Dr. M. W. Lewis, a self-realized American yogi. Dr. Lewis was Paramahansa Yogananda's first American disciple and dearest personal friend. The wisdom Dr. Lewis imparts through these teachings will give you a dynamic and practical insight into the ancient science of yoga as taught by Paramahansa Yogananda. This lecture's title is Death, What Is It? And was recorded in San Diego, California on September 18, 1955.
Subject this morning, death, what is it? Death, what is it? I looked in the dictionary and I found a definition of death, extinction or end. Now anything that ends must have a beginning. Remember that. Anything that ends must have had a beginning. And so, we should realize the first axiom, greatest axiom is that death occurs in that realm of Maya or creation. Death means the end of something that had a beginning. And that means the creation of God, the dream of God, and the outward consciousness in that dream, of which we are a part. This body is a part of the Maya, the creation of God. It is made from His consciousness. And the consciousness in our bodies is God's consciousness attached to the vehicle as human consciousness. It is that which has the beginning, and it is that which has the end, and therefore it is that human consciousness, as well as our bodies as a part of the creation of God, which passes away, which dies, not the underlying consciousness. And so in the cosmic aspect, that which dies is the creation of God, of which our body is a part, and the consciousness in His creation as duality of consciousness. That is what passes away. When we consider the cosmic aspect, when we consider the individual aspect, it is the consciousness of God attached to the vehicle as our own human consciousness that passes away. Our human consciousness is God's consciousness. But because He's sleeping rather soundly in His creation, He becomes attached to the various parts. And that's why we feel separated from God. It is still His consciousness in us as the ego, the human consciousness. And as the body is born, so that human consciousness is born with it. But the sad part is that it becomes so attached to the body and becomes so much one with it that when the body dies, the human consciousness feels itself finished, ended. And so you can see it behooves us to know something besides human consciousness, because that having a beginning must have an ending. Remember that, one thing, that your human consciousness with which you are listening to me and looking at me is God's consciousness. But it is attached to the vehicle. And remember, it is that which is attached that passes away. It is that which is attached to the human vehicle that passes away, not the reality behind. So remember, that is what death is. Death is God's consciousness in each and every one of us attached to the vehicle which passes away. As far as consciousness is concerned, consciousness passes away. That entity within each and every one of us, as Dr. Lewis or Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, that passes away. That is still God's consciousness. But sad to say, it is attached to the imperishable, to the perishable vehicle, the changing body. That is what death is. Death of that which was created, not death of that which always was and always will be, the eternal soul within. Now going on just a little bit to make it a little more understandable is this one point which the Master stressed so much. If you will try and understand your dream consciousness and then apply it to God's great consciousness, you will understand easily what death is. Now when we dream, a part of our consciousness is segregated, so to speak, and produces a little drama within us. But please remember, it is still your consciousness. Now in that drama you have various parts that are played. Now your consciousness becomes attached to that part it is playing. Now when the dream is resolved, that consciousness which was attached to that part which you are playing in your dream, what happens to it? It vanishes. Because it had a beginning with your dream, it has an ending with the dream. Do you understand? Now what is left? Your consciousness, which was the consciousness in the dream, but it was attached to the dream. Do you understand? Just like a cake of ice. Cake of ice has shape, size, weight, mass, temperature. But when you change the conditions and the ice melts, where is the cake of ice? That which had a beginning must have an ending. So that consciousness in you, which had a beginning and became an entity with the formation of this body, that passes away, just like the cake of ice passes away. And the thing from which it was made, the reality stays. And so with us, that which produced this body and that which produced the consciousness in the body, which became identified, is the reality that stays. And so with God's great dream, this creation is produced the same way. A part of him was set aside. It says so in the Gita. I haven't time to read it. It said a portion of myself was set aside and produced creation.